everybody. Welcome to the first Girl Geek Dinner of 2013. Yes. I'm Sukruta. I'm the organizer of Girl Geek Dinners. This Bay Area chapter started in 2008 by Angie Chang, who's also here. We're looking forward to what the speakers are going to say, which is going to be very, very insightful and very full of wisdom, obviously. But I'm going to try to urge everybody in the back to try to squeeze their way in the front. There are a few seats in the front, so don't be shy. Do you want to come closer? OK, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Girl Geek Dinners is supposed to be a space for you to be able to network, meet like-minded women, because there obviously aren't that many women in most tech companies, engineering companies. So I know we've gotten a little bit more popular, and hence it's harder to get tickets to these dinners. But when you actually are here, make an attempt to network and make contacts. Because we've gotten feedback that a lot of people get job offers through these dinners. So why not talk and network? And of course, eat the great food and drink the great wine and the amazing drinks that they have laid out for us. I'm going to hand it over. Thank you so much, Palantir, for kicking this off in such a big way. As soon as we entered, we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I'm sure everybody else thought the same. If you want to tweet about the dinner, please tweet at Bay Area GGD. Our hashtag is PalantirGGD. I'm going to be tweeting from the Girl Geek page, so if you tweet, I will retweet. So, well, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, who's going to get it started. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. A very happy New Year, and welcome to Palantir's second Girl Geek Dinner. We are so excited to have you here in our brand new event space, which I agree, it looks pretty good, so big props to our events team. My name is Aisling, and I've been a designer at Palantir for a little over 2 years, what has been a truly incredible experience. As a designer, I get to work on a lot of different projects. I've worked on metro station campaigns, the UI and UX of web applications. I've helped organize our company-wide conference, which we affectionately call HobbitCon. Yes. This past winter, I even got to tell the story through video of how our engineers revolutionized disaster relief after Hurricane Sandy, which was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. But I have to say, the thing that I geek out the most about, more than new fonts or Git commits, is helping organize these Girl Geek Dinners. And I'm so happy to see so many Girl Geeks here. This year, we're excited to host 4 fantastic women in their fields. Each are thinking about how technology can be used to change the world and how data can seed that change. Change the world. It's as if our childhood dreams are coming true. We are superheroes, we're scientists, we're philanthropists, we're teachers. And that's truly incredible. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Lucy Bernholz spends her days thinking about the future of good, how we can create, fund, and distribute shared social goods in the digital age. She's a visiting scholar at Stanford, go Cardinal, and has written extensively on the topic of disrupting philanthropy. She believes that with shared data and powerful technology, we can change the playing field. So let's welcome Lucy Bernholz.
This is very exciting. I didn't realize this was the launch of the space, so it's a real fun opportunity for me to be here with you. I'm definitely not the techie in the crowd. In fact, I was about to ask Aisling how to use this thing, but I'll try to figure it out. I'm actually an historian by training, so my data come from dead people. But I've moved on from that, and I'm somewhat obsessed with the question of what's private, what's public, and who decides. And that's what led me into philanthropy, and from there, that's what's led me into data. So let me introduce something to you. You're probably familiar with the word philanthropy, its Greek origins, love of mankind. I want to distinguish between the behaviors of philanthropy, which have been with us since the dawn of time. And some of the most interesting research going on right now, actually, is the sociobiology of altruism, and in functional MRIs about what the brain does when we help someone. This is something that's hardwired into us as a species, whether it's mutual aid, giving our time, giving our money, or building a community that's supportive and resilient. We are hardwired as a species to do this. But that's not what you were thinking about when you saw the word philanthropy. You were thinking about foundations and nonprofits and giving money. How many of you were thinking about foundations and nonprofits and giving money? And right? You weren't thinking about sociobiology of ants, probably. But here, that model of philanthropy, which is the one that I study, and the one that I've worked in for 20 some odd years, is a fascinating ecosystem in and of itself. There's about 1.5 million nonprofits in the US. They have $4 trillion in assets. They do about $2 trillion in revenue moving every year. $600 billion in American Foundation endowment assets. $300 billion in individual giving, you and me and each of us and those foundations every year. It's an enormous ecosystem. It's an enormous business. And it's very, very fragmented. It's huge, it's fragmented, and it's driven by passion. It's driven by where am I supposed to be pointing this thing? It is designed, it's a system that's designed to allow each of us, and sometimes collectively, but definitely as individuals, to follow the thing that we care most about, whether as a donor or as a doer. And that's an important value that's built into it. Uh-oh, now it's on automatic. But it's led us to this extraordinarily fragmented industry that's ready to be reinvented. This is a test, right, to see if the historian can actually drive the doohickey, as we call it in the humanities. So what I'm hoping to move us to, in the work that I'm doing at Stanford now, having just sold a business, I've moved back to Stanford to launch something we're calling the Civil Space Lab, is move us from passion-first philanthropy to data-first philanthropy. And we're not anywhere near there. We are as far from that as you can be, basically. Right now, after 10 plus years of taking IRS data and making it available so you can know all those statistics that I just rattled off to you, we are finally at a place in the world of philanthropy where some of the industry data is coming online. It's not machine readable, it's not accessible, it's almost entirely behind proprietary firewalls, and most of those are managed by nonprofit organizations. This is not a sector that's leading its own reinvention, which isn't new, that's common, but I want you to be clear that that applies here in philanthropy as well. It's very uncommon that those passionate donors and doers make their decisions based on any data. Very uncommon. It's rare that we see philanthropic data mashed up with or looked at in the context of public sector data on issues or revenue or resources. We simply don't have a culture of pulling data sets together to think about how we could change the world. And imagine how we could change the world if we started with what we knew about something like disease rates, geography, demographics, and infrastructure, and then built the services and the supply chain of organizations around that data. You could still follow your passion, but you'd start with data first. What we're trying to get to is a system, what I'm trying to get us to, is a system and a culture where you start with that information. You then bring the passionate donors and the doers along. They will make their selections based on whatever it is that's driving them. But they will use the data to define the cause. They will use the data to move on the cause. They will use the data to figure out if they're having any effect on the cause. and then they will start the process all over again. That would be data-first philanthropy. I'm actually trainable, you'd never know it. And I want you to think about this on 3 levels, because where we're seeing the most change right now, and the area of this that gives me the most hope, is at the organizational level. I can give you several dozen, I won't, but I could give you several dozen, examples of organizations that are truly being data-first organizations. How many of you have heard of the organization DoSomething.org? Okay, so they're becoming sort of, to the degree that this movement has a poster child, they're the poster child for an organization that starts with data. They organize teenagers to take on movements and causes and make change happen in their communities, whether it's an anti-bullying crusade or gathering clothes for the homeless. They do a whole range of things, but they start with the kids. It's a distributed network of teenagers connected by what else? SMS. And Do Something manages the messaging and the outreach and the connection to mainstream media and the connection from one community to another by managing the data and mashing it up for the kids and collecting that information. They're also, unexpectedly to them, but obvious to the data scientists in the room, starting to see some remarkable insights around what matters to teenagers, because effectively in doing their work, they've created a new data source for understanding teenagers in America in 2013. So there's an extraordinary organization there. Another organization, it was mentioned briefly, is one that Palantir works with, Direct Relief International, a disaster response organization here in the States that has the responsibility to provide prescription medicine post-disaster. Now think about it. You've lost your house. Your neighbors have lost your house, but you need an asthma inhaler or you need insulin. You've got an immediate problem. And partnering with Palantir, there's extraordinary stories from what they were able to do, Palantir, Direct Relief International, and folks on the ground on the East Coast during and after Sandy to help people get those resources in the very short window of time that they needed them. If you don't get your insulin or your asthma inhaler in a short period of time, you've got an even bigger problem on your hands than the fact that you have no house. So there's some extraordinary examples at the organizational level where we're starting to see enterprises really think about the data they have access to and how they can do their work around it. But the interesting level, the next interesting level out is the issue level. There's an organization called Faster Cures, which has been around for about, I don't know, a dozen years. Anybody know Faster Cures? It is a collection of, or a funding source for multiple disease-specific foundations. One of the greatest sources of philanthropy in this country, given what I said a minute ago about how the system works, is if somebody in your family gets a disease and your family has the resources, you will start a foundation around that disease. You could care less if there were already 300 foundations around that disease. And so we have this multiplicity of disease-specific foundations, all of them doing their own thing, funding their own thing. What Faster Cures is about is bringing those organizations together, the best of them, and changing the way they fund research by sharing the data. So that the research that's happening about an orphan form of cancer, which affects a very small number of people, but might have some extraordinary research going on, that information, the patient registries, the disease data, the symptom registries, all of that becomes available to the doctors, the researchers, say at the Myelin Repair Foundation, who work on myelin, which is the sheath on the nerves in your brain, big factor in MS. They can start to look for the data and the breakthroughs and the drug interventions that might be useful there. They're basically bringing all of these silos together at Faster Cures, funding cure entrepreneurs, and trying to change the entire way medical disease research is done. That's a fairly significant intervention. And where does it start? It starts with the data. There's another level out, though. We've got to get to the system level. Has anybody here heard of the term impact investing? A couple of people, that's great. So impact investing is sort of the second generation of socially responsible investing. It's one way to think about it. It's about using your investments actively in enterprises that produce both a financial return and a social return. It's very much modeled after typical investing, and it very much carries forward all of the work we've learned about actually thinking about impact and thinking about social return. It's a market that's starting rather small. There's several $100 million in it now. It's estimated by JP Morgan to grow to $1 billion by 2020, and it is entirely dependent on open, shareable data. It won't happen. And if it does happen, it won't happen without it, and if it does happen, it will be because folks have come up with common metrics, common data standards, shared information about measuring those returns, and use that to build an entirely new capital market for social good. That would be a system level change that would be worth getting behind. The other one I want to mention is the world of data itself. How data move in the social sector is a huge issue for our time. These are organizations, this is a system built 100 years ago that hasn't changed much in 100 years and has no awareness of the issues of data access, data ownership, openness, privacy, no way to think about those in the public interest. Just take a minute and recognize the role of JSTOR and MIT in Aaron Swartz's life, and you'll realize that the so-called good guys are not always on the right side of the data question. We need entirely new enterprises, more than just licensing forms, but new ways to organize our institutions so that data that can produce a public interest, a public good, can actually be kept open and available to people while still having their privacy protected. We're not there yet. That's a system level change. The last thing I want to say about what's happening in the social sector and what data make possible in a data-first philanthropy world would be to remember the data divide. In this room, other than myself, who's a historian again, doesn't know her way around a database, that divide might not be so apparent. But the rest of the world is not you guys, or you girl geeks. And the one thing we know about change, we've learned a couple things in hundreds of years of doing this, but the one thing we know for sure is that making social change is hard, and making social change stick only happens when the people who are most affected by the solution to the problem are involved in defining and implementing the solution to the problem, and that matters here. We need you all to get involved in this, to bring your skills, but to use the data not to exacerbate that divide, not to make the chasm bigger, but to find ways to engage with the data directly, the people most affected by whatever it is you're working on. So again, the Palantir Direct Relief International example is a great one where the folks from Palantir were on the ground in the Rockaways with the people who'd lost their homes, thinking about what the data looked like in real life and engaging the people who live there in making the change that they needed to see to put their lives back together. So data-first philanthropy is, I believe, the future of the entire social sector. It's great fun to be here with you to talk about it a little bit, and I hope you'll join me in using data to make change happen. Thank you.